Most students get a few butterflies on the first day of school, but for some it can be a lot more than that. Joining us today with helpful suggestions on how to help your child cope is the Clinical Director of Behaviour Matters, Tania DaSilva. Tania, thank you very much for joining us today. So many things that we could talk about heading into this. Because for some kids, it's the first day, they're just nervous. Other kids are going back to face things that weren't addressed the year before. Exactly. What are some of the big concerns for parents?
Well, like you said, sometimes there is those peer issues that weren't addressed the year before. So they're struggling socially. They're not really making those connections. Sometimes, again, it's an academic piece where they were struggling last year. It wasn't addressed, and they're worried about what's to come this year. Sometimes it is just conflict, either conflict with a teacher or conflict at home that they're pulling over, a new school, or just those unknown factors. They just don't know what to expect.
How do you, what are the things, first of all, what are the things you'll look for? I mean, there's going to be a little bit of nerves anyways on the first day of school. Some kids are excited, but a lot of kids are nervous about it. What are some of the things, though, that go beyond that?
Well, and you're right with that. I find a lot of kids, because they are going from summer where there wasn't really any expectation or structure, and now they're going back to full-fledged demands. It's normal that they're feeling a little nervous this first week or having that adjustment period. But for a lot of other families, there's the obvious signs, the isolation, the sadness, the crying, the saying that they don't want to go. But then there's also the behavior piece. So we find a lot of families will bring their kids in, and they're like, we're seeing these behaviors. They're throwing things in the morning. They're having tantrums. They're saying, just a whole bunch of mean things. But it's not actually behaviors. It's the anxiety that they're kind of masking through behaviors.
And they're lashing out to show that. I mean, what's a normal amount of time for some of those things that just maybe tie to that first day of school? When do you start saying, no, this is actually going on too long?
So for us, we always kind of use that 1 week to 2 week marker. So it typically takes a week for them to settle in. If by second week we're still really struggling to get them there, then that's something to start paying attention to. A lot of families wait a little too long. They're like, let's see how they're doing in a month. By then, everyone else has already settled in, right?
About 1 or 2 weeks at best. And what can you do to help your child?
So there's a lot of things. Typically, we always push that conversation piece. So open up that space where you're able to talk about feelings, so you can validate them, you can normalize them, you can explore it, and you also give your kids that opportunity to talk to you about what they potentially need. I find in society we typically push off emotions, so just creating that space is really good, as well as giving them the opportunity to focus on the positive with you. So going back to friendship, a lot of them are worried about, maybe I won't have friends in my class. Okay, so what does a friend look like? What kind of friends do you want around you? So even if you don't have those kids in your class, you know what you're looking for and what you're working towards.
And just going back to the space for a second, that space that maybe can generate a conversation. It's different for different ages. What are some suggestions to get somewhere comfortable that the kids will open up?
So you're right, it really depends on the age. I find for younger kids, they don't have that emotional language. So something we do with our kids is a body scan. So even cluing in, starting from head to toe, and just cluing into what you're feeling. Where are you feeling that nervousness? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your hands? So that you're starting to get them to make that mind-body connection. With your teens, they typically already have that mind-body connection. So you can be a lot more directive, where it's, what are you worried about? What did you struggle with last year? What are you trying to avoid? And typically you'll get those responses.
And is there a good spot to have that conversation? Like, do they need a distraction while you're talking to them to kind of let them open up? Or do you do it one-on-one, face-to-face?
It really depends on the family dynamic and what works. I find some of our families, they have those conversations in the morning because it's just a quieter, easier space. For some, they have it before bed. Some, it's after school. So it's figuring out a time that works for you, where you're noticing we already have pretty positive interactions at this time, so let's bring in the conversation.
And one last question, we talked about it off air. A mistake that parents often make is that they let kids avoid something.
Absolutely. So I worked in the school, so I used to see that all the time first week. If your child is staying home, you want to make sure that you're staying on that school schedule. They're getting up, they're eating lunch, they're doing school work or activity booklets, and you're giving them those 15 minutes of playtime, but it's not even video games. It's you're going outside the same way you would if you were at school.
So maintains the schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
Tania, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so
it's
much for
an
having me.
important day for a lot of people. Thanks very much.